Hey, what's up, everybody? Platform Disciple here. The spoiler season has begun for War of the Spark. I'm really excited about it, and I'm going to go over all of the cards that have been revealed thus far and just give my quick opinion on them. Let me preface this by saying, because we're so early in the spoiler season, my opinions on these cards could be completely wrong and could change entirely when they reveal the rest of the set, because looking at the cards in a kind of standalone vacuum does not give me a good sense of how, effective they're going to be, but at least we have something to talk about. So let's jump right into it. So let's begin by kind of giving honorable mention to a couple of reprints that we're getting. One is Ajani's Pridemate, which those of you who play MTG Arena are probably already aware of the card. And the other is Augur of Bolas, which is a little bit of an older reprint. Both of these are very solid cards. They're nothing mind-blowing, and it's not really that big of a deal that they're getting reprinted, but it's nice to see them. Alright, so let's talk about the game mechanics in War of the Spark. To begin with, Planeswalkers are a core theme, so there will be a Planeswalker in every booster pack, possibly more than one. And Planeswalkers are also making appearances at lower rarities than before, including as low as uncommons. The other big thing is Planeswalkers now have static effects, which is completely new. So they function a little bit like enchantments, but they can be killed, and they do still have other abilities. Notably, the uncommon Planeswalkers don't have any ability to increase their loyalty, so they can use their ability once or twice and then kind of just sit around. But anyways, just talking about those uncommon Planeswalkers, I think all of them are cool and potentially introduce interesting strategies, but as of now, I don't think that these cards are going to impact Standard outside of Draft. Alright, next up is the new Ajani card, who I think is pretty good. The passive Vigilance effect is nice, but not really that important. Giving your creatures +1/+1 counters is great, especially in green-white, which is typically creature-based. Giving loyalty to your other Planeswalkers as of now I don't think is relevant, because we haven't seen any inexpensive Planeswalkers that are going to be able to take advantage of like the big AoE boost that you're going to get. It'd probably only add 1 or 2 loyalty to other Planeswalkers. But the ability to gain 3 life every turn is very, very significant currently, because mono red burn is very strong. So whether or not Ajani is going to be viable or not is very much contingent on whether or not mono red continues to be one of the strongest decks. I think if it is still one of the strongest decks, then this could be a pretty effective card at combating mono red. Next up, we're taking a peek at the new Jace Planeswalker, who right off the bat does have a plus ability that draws cards, which historically has been very strong on low-cost Planeswalkers. He is 4 mana, so he fits into that category. The real question, though, is about his passive effect, which is reminiscent of Laboratory Maniac, which was not strong in Standard, but has proved to be quite effective in other formats. Jace definitely looks a lot like that card, so has a lot of potential. I don't know if he's going to make it in Standard. It really depends on if there's other cards that are going to help you blow through your deck incredibly quickly. As for the new Liliana, it's tough to say. She's definitely really beefy. She's a huge bomb. Like, she wins you draft every single time. Her +1 ability is a lot of incremental value, and you get to draw lots of extra cards probably, because you're either going to be blocking with those zombies and they're dying, or you're attacking with them and they have to be blocked, in which case they are dying, and you're drawing cards. So that seems very good. Her other 2 abilities are kind of underwhelming in my opinion. And she is quite a bit of mana, so I don't know if she's going to be very impactful in Standard or not. I'm leaning towards not impactful. There isn't a current deck that I can see her being played in, but it could turn out that she gets run as like a 1 or 2 of as a finisher for control decks. The last Planeswalker we're going to be looking at is Tezzeret, who unfortunately revolves around artifacts very heavily. So in Standard, I think it's safe to say that he's not going to have an impact unless there are a lot of artifacts in this set, which at the moment we have no reason to believe that's going to be the case. But he does have some incredibly powerful abilities that could affect other formats, notably Commander. Affinity for artifacts has been a historically incredibly powerful game mechanic, It's just one that I don't think is going to work in a format that has very few effective artifacts. All right, next we're taking a look at a completely new game mechanic, which is the amass keyword. And this one, what it does is if you do not control an army, you create a 0/0 army and then put +1/+1 counters on it equal to the number after the amass keyword. Or if you already control an army, you put that many +1/+1 counters on an existing army. So for the most part, you're only going to have one army token in play unless there's some shenanigans going around. So that's just something to think about, where you're piling high as opposed to going wide. And historically, piling high is less effective, but it is an interesting mechanic, and it's received some support even in the spoilers we've seen already. So those first couple cards are pretty much draft chaff, where you're probably not going to see any play in standard because they're just too underpowered. But Invade the City is potentially going to see play. I'm leaning towards a no because it's basically a worse Drake. The Drakes have power equal to the number of instants and sorceries in your graveyard. The Drakes have flying, and the Drakes also increase their power as instants and sorceries continue to be added to your graveyard. But Invade the City itself is a sorcery, which is notable, and if there's enough support for the army mechanic or amass mechanic in general, it's possible that this may make the cut in a deck like that. The next one is going to be Widespread Brutality, and this is definitely the sort of card that the amass mechanic would need to make it have some competitive viability. This card is a board wipe that is, generally speaking, going to hit just your opponent's stuff because it only hits non-army creatures, and if your deck is really built around the amass mechanic, it's possible that you're not going to have any or very few creatures in your deck that are non-army creatures, and it also gives you an army. So basically this card is pretty core in that deck. It's a question of how much more support it gets, but there is an additional card coming up that is another card that's looking like it's pretty good. And that card would be the Dreadhorde Invasion, which is very, very good looking. It's a card that is going to supply you with an army every turn if you do not have an army. So you can basically block indefinitely, or in the event that you can keep your army alive for long enough and get it to a 6/6, it can attack and recuperate some of the life that the card is losing you. And if you have multiple Dreadhorde Invasions in play, this is going to be happening faster. At a minimum, this looks like an insanely powerful card for draft. So if you ever see this card and you are early in the draft, or even potentially late in the draft, if you're able to go into black, this is just such a good card. But anyways, I'll return to what I was saying before, which is that the piling high as opposed to going wide mechanic is hard because the armies don't have trample, which means they can easily be chump blocked, and they don't have any form of protection in any kind of way. So if you have this massive army, it can just get killed. So I think it's really hard for me to say if it's going to be a viable strategy outside of draft, but there's possible more support cards that are going to be coming that may change my mind. The last game mechanic is one that we have seen before a long time ago in the Scars of Mirrodin set, or specifically it came up much more as we approach New Phyrexia, but it allows you to increase the number of counters on permanents in play, and notably that affects Planeswalker loyalty, and it also affects the +1/+1 counters that will be on the army cards. So it's an interesting mechanic because it does relate to both of the other mechanics we've seen. In addition, this is potentially one of the better cards we have ever gotten for Proliferate because it's capable of proliferating multiple times, and notably multiple times in a given turn, and it's reasonably statted. So if Proliferate turns out to be a crucial mechanic, this could be good, but I don't see it fitting into any existing decks. But of course, some new decks will pop up, and it's possible that this will fit into that new deck. Alright, so that covers it for the game mechanics. There's a few other cards that I can just run through quickly, beginning with Bolas's Citadel, and quite frankly, this card looks absolutely insanely, crazily powerful, and the only thing that has any chance of holding the card back is that it's 6 mana and it's mono black, or it's got a lot of black mana in it. But being able to cast spells for free, being able to cast spells from the top of your library, both of those are crazy, crazy, crazy powerful effects. If this doesn't end up getting played in Standard, it will absolutely be getting played in Commander, where you have the luxury of having 40 starting life. So tough to say. Interestingly, I will point out that I think this card might be genuinely bad in Draft. Tough to say, but it's definitely got a lot of potential because being able to cast spells for free and generating a lot of card value is just super good. And maybe there's an off chance you'll actually use the tap effect and kill somebody, but it doesn't seem nearly as likely as you just winning the game by casting a bunch of cards. Okay, the next card is another kind of hit or miss, which is Interplanar Beacon. This card is a card that supports a very Planeswalker dense deck. At the moment, there's clearly quite a few Planeswalkers, but there aren't any cards that are really encouraging you to put a lot of them in your deck, with the exception of this one. So unless they introduce a bunch of other cards that are going to support having a lot of Planeswalkers in your deck, I don't think this is going to be very good, because generally speaking, historically, you want to have only a couple Planeswalkers in your deck and then have the rest of the deck supporting them by defending them, because they can get killed. And the more Planeswalkers you have in your deck, the less ability you have to defend them from your opponent just swinging at them every single turn. Right, I am going to kind of lump together Ignite the Beacon and Ravnica at War, because these two cards are rares that fall under the category of I don't really need that effect. It's possible that these effects may turn out to be useful in some format, but at the moment, tutoring 2 Planeswalkers for 5 mana doesn't seem like it's very necessary, except maybe in a Planeswalker commander deck, and exiling all multicolored permanents seems questionable, unless it turns out that it's like a sideboard tech against some very specific deck. There's no reason to really think that that's an important effect that you need. Alright, before we finish up here, I will quickly mention Emergence Zone, because it's kind of a cool card. There aren't many effects that are going to let you play cards as if they have flash, let alone on a land, so I suspect this will probably make its way into Commander, but there isn't much of a reason to suspect that this card will get played anywhere else, because, well, I guess I just don't really know what you're planning on flashing in. It could be that there is some kind of combo you can do, but I just don't see it at the moment. But anyways, the remaining cards are all fine, not very interesting, and quite frankly are not going to see play outside a draft. You might be thinking, oh, well, it doesn't seem like that bad of a card, but at the moment, each of these following cards all have equivalents that are pretty much strictly better, that already are in Standard, and there's not really much reason for me to think that you're going to need more of those sorts of effects in your deck. And that pretty much sums up the video. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will be posting additional videos as more spoilers come out. Until next time, peace out.